What single event caused the eruption of the Chinese Civil War? The Chinese Civil War that began in 1927 between the Communists and the Nationalists was not started by a single event, but by numerous uprisings, massacres and revolts that occurred across several months, and while the conflict between the two opposing factions was halted while they fought to eradicate China of the threat of the Japanese Empire during the War of Japanese Aggression. The conflict continued from 1945 and was not brought to a conclusion until the formation of the People's Republic of China in 1949. For this video, we'll take a look at three of the major events that led to the outbreak of this conflict: the Shanghai Massacre, that began in April 1927, followed by the August 1927 Nanchang Uprising and the subsequent Little Long March, before completing the video with a look at the Autumn Harvest Uprising. Shanghai Massacre. The Shanghai Massacre that occurred on the 12th of April 1927 is also known as the April 12th Purge, or is more commonly known in China, the April 12th Incident. Whichever of these you know it by, it was the violent suppression of Chinese Communist Party organizations and leftist elements in the city of Shanghai by forces in support of General Chiang Kai-shek and conservative factions within the Chinese Nationalist Party. This event began the campaign of anti-communist repression in nationalist China. Following this incident, conservative elements within the KMT conducted a full-scale purge of communists in all the areas under their control, with acts of violent suppression occurring in the cities of Guangzhou and Changsha. The anti-communist purge led to an open split between the KMT's left wing and its right wing, with Chiang Kai-shek establishing himself as the leader of the right-wing faction based in Nanjing, while the opposition faction of the left wing was under the leadership of Wang Jingwei, based in Wuhan. By the 15th of July 1927, the Wuhan regime had eliminated all the communists within its ranks, thus effectively ending the First United Front, which had been a working alliance of both the KMT and the Chinese Communist Party. Background to the incident. The incident of the 12th of April 1927 is rooted in the KMT's alliance with the Soviet Union and was formally initiated by Sun Yat-sen, the founder of the KMT, after discussions with Soviet diplomats in January 1923. The alliance included both financial and military aid, in addition to a small group of Soviet political and military advisors headed by Mikhail Borodin. The conditions laid down by the Soviets included cooperation with the then small Chinese Communist Party. Sun agreed to the Communists joining the KMT as individuals, but ruled out an alliance with them as an organized bloc. He further demanded that the Communists, upon joining the KMT, adhere to their ideology and observe party discipline. Following their admission to the KMT, Communist activities, often covert, attracted opposition to the alliance among the more prominent members of the KMT, with internal conflicts erupting between the left-wing and right-wing leaders of the KMT. Northern Expedition. Plans for a northern expedition were originally expressed by Sun Yat-sen after Sun was expelled from the Peking government. He had, by 1920, made a military comeback and gained control of some parts of Guangdong province. Sun's goal was to extend his control over all of China, including Peking. After the death of Sun Yat-sen from cancer in March 1925, the leaders of the KMT continued with the idea of the Northern Expedition after they had purged the communists from Guangzhou, as well as the Soviet advisors, during what became known as the Canton Coup on the 20th of March 1926, finally launching the expedition that June. There were initial successes in the first months of that push that saw the KMT's National Revolutionary Army taking control of Guangdong province in large areas, of the provinces of Hunan, Hubei, Jiangxi and Fujian. Control of the party's direction and leadership intensified as the authority and military strength of the KMT grew. By January 1927, under the leadership of Chiang Kai-shek, the NRA captured Wuhan before attacking Nanchang, with the KMT leader Wang Jingwei, along with his left-wing allies that included the Chinese Communists and the Soviet agent Borodin, transferring the seat of the nationalist government from Guangzhou to Wuhan. On the 1st of March 1927, the nationalist government reorganized the military commission and placed Chiang under its jurisdiction, while it secretly plotted to have him placed under arrest. However, Chiang found out about the plot before it could be conducted, and this was the most likely explanation for his determination to purge the communists from the KMT. In response to the advances made by the National Revolutionary Army, communists in Shanghai began to plan uprisings against the warlords that controlled the city. On the 21st and 22nd of March, KMT and CCP union workers under the leadership of Zhou Enlai and Chen Duxiao launched an armed uprising in the city and defeated the warlords of the Zili clique. The union workers then occupied and governed urban Shanghai, with the exception of the international settlements, prior to the arrival of the NRA's Eastern Route Army. After the Nanking incident, in which foreign concessions in the city of Nanjing were attacked and looted, both the right wing of the KMT as well as Western powers became alarmed by the growth of the communists, who continued to organize daily mass student protests and labor strikes to demand the return of Shanghai's international settlements to Chinese control. By April 2nd, General Bai Chongxi's army was firmly in control of Shanghai, and on that day, the Central Control Commission of the KMT determined that the actions of the CCP were anti-revolutionary and undermined the national interests of China, voting unanimously to purge the communists from the KMT. Purge. The Purge, also referred to as the White Terror, targeted members of the CCP and anyone perceived to be a sympathizer. On the 5th of April 1927, Wang Jingwei arrived in Shanghai and met with the leader of the CCP, Chen Duxian. A joint declaration was issued reaffirming the cooperation between the KMT and the CCP, despite urgent pleas from Chiang Kai-shek and other KMT elders to eliminate the communist influence. The following day, Wang traveled to Wuhan, and Chiang asked gang leaders in Shanghai to form a rival union to oppose the labor union controlled by the communists, and made the final preparations for purging the CCP members. A few days later, on the 9th of April, Chiang Kai-shek declared a state of martial law in Shanghai and denounced the Wuhan nationalist government's policy of cooperation with the CCP. This was followed by the issuing of a secret order to all provinces on the 11th of April to purge all communists from the KMT. Before dawn on the 12th of April, attacks began on the Union District offices, and under an emergency decree, Chiang ordered the 26th Army to disarm the workers' militias. This order resulted in more than 300 people being killed or wounded. The unions organized a mass meeting denouncing Chiang Kai-shek on the 13th, which resulted in thousands of workers and students descending upon the headquarters of the 26th Army to protest. Soldiers opened fire on the protesters, and more than 100 were killed, with many more suffering from gunshot wounds. Chiang then dissolved the provisional government of Shanghai, in addition to any labor unions under communist control, replacing them with a network of unions that showed allegiance to the KMT. Numbers vary, but several sources state that over 1,000 communists and left-wing KMT members were arrested, around 300 were executed, and another 5,000 went missing. Another 5,000 communists and leftists were allegedly killed, while other sources claim the numbers killed were around 10,000. Aftermath and significance. The Nationalist government was established in Nanking on the 18th of April with Chiang Kai-shek installed as its leader. Within 20 days, more than 10,000 communists were executed in the city of Changsha, with the Soviet Union officially terminated its cooperation with the KMT. Wang Jingwei, in fear of retribution as a communist sympathizer, fled to Europe. After Wang's departure, the Wuhan nationalist government soon stopped functioning, leaving Chiang Kai-shek as the sole leader of the KMT. After April 1927, 300,000 people were killed in Hunan after 3 years. In 3 years of warfare against the communists, while unknown numbers of Hakka and Shui people, including whole families, were killed in the mountains, and young women sold into prostitution. Around 80,000 people were killed in Ziling, Hunan province, and another approximately 300,000 people were killed in Jialing County, Leiyang, Liuyang, and Pingjiang in Hunan. Meanwhile, immediately after the purge, 39 members of the KMT Central Committee in Wuhan publicly denounced Chiang Kai-shek as a traitor to Sun Yat-sen. Among those denouncing Chiang was Sun's widow, Sun Qingling. Despite this, Chiang was defiant, forming a brand new nationalist government to rival the communist-tolerant one in Wuhan, with the twin rival KMT governments becoming known as the Ninghan split. Although this did not last long, for in May of 1927, communists and peasant leaders in the Wuhan area were repeatedly attacked by nationalists. On the 1st of June, a telegram was sent by Joseph Stalin calling for the mobilization of an army of peasants and workers. In early July of 1927, a new government was formed in Shanxi that implemented the White Terror within that province. Within 2 months, they had killed 496 people, including students. The Communist Central Authorities ordered this Shanxi Party branch to respond with peasant revolts. However, the initial response was seen as a failure before the Weihua Uprising began in March 1928. Chen Duxiu led the communists together with his Soviet advisors. They had originally promoted cooperation with the KMT, but were discredited, losing their roles as leaders, with Chen personally blamed, forced to resign, and replaced by Chu Qiaobai, who used the same policies as Chen. The CCP planned for worker uprisings and revolutions in urban areas. However, the White Terror campaign completely routed the communists, with only 10,000 party members surviving out of an original estimate of around 60,000. The Nanchang Uprising. In August 1927, the Nanchang Uprising was the point at which the conflict between the Chinese Communist Party and the Nationalist Party of China, often referred to as the Kuomintang, became an outright rebellion and became the starting point for the Chinese Civil War. The uprising was initiated by the Communists in response to the massacre of their party comrades in Shanghai by the Kuomintang some 4 months earlier. The left wing of the Kuomintang established a revolutionary committee at Nanchang in an effort to plant the spark that would hopefully ignite a widespread peasant uprising. Among the political leaders of this committee were Deng Yanda, Song Qingling, and Zhang Fakui. Meanwhile, military forces in Nanchang under the leadership of He Long and Zhou Enlai rebelled in an attempt to seize control of the city after the end of the First Kuomintang Communist Alliance. Other important leaders in this event included Zede, Ye Ting, and Liu Bocheng. Communist forces successfully occupied Nanchang before they escaped from the siege by Kuomintang forces on the 5th of August, withdrawing into the Jinggan Mountains of western Jiangxi. Later, the 1st of August 1927 was regarded as the founding of the People's Liberation Army, in addition to being the first action fought against the Kuomintang and the National Revolutionary Army. Battle at Nanchang. At their peak strength during the Nanchang Uprising, Communist forces numbered over 20,000, although some of that number did not arrive in Nanchang until a day after the initial battle. They were organized into the Second Front Army under the command of He Long. On the morning of the 1st of August 1927, at exactly 2 a.m, the Communist forces began their attack on the city from several different directions, and within 4 hours they had control of the city, having captured around 5,000 small arms and around 1 million rounds of ammunition. Following a counterattack from the Nationalists, the Communists retreated south towards the province of Guangdong. Once in that province, the aim was to take the city of Guangzhou while spreading their influence over the peasants and farmers of the region. Little Long March. On the 3rd of August, the retreat from Nanchang began, and known as the Little Long March, it came to an end at the beginning of October as they descended from the Hakka Highlands and into the area surrounding Chaoshan in the east of Guangdong province, where they were defeated by soldiers affiliated to the Nationalists. Escaping Communist forces were divided into two main directions, one headed towards Shanghai, where they engaged the Nationalists in guerrilla warfare under the leadership of Peng Pai, while the remainder headed towards southern Hunan province, where they eventually joined up with a force under control of Mao Zedong, whose Autumn Harvest Uprising had also ended largely in failure. The Communists, having suffered a decisive and disastrous defeat, remained a unit of only around 1,000 soldiers under the leadership of Zhu De and Chen Yi, who both went under fake names and approached a local warlord in Hunan province for a safe refuge. From these humble beginnings, the force eventually grew to a strength of over 10,000 before travelling to Jiangxi province and joining up with Mao Zedong at Jinganshan in the month of April 1928. Liu Bochong, on becoming a fugitive, escaped to the Soviet Union with the help of other communists, where he gained military training. Guo Moro fled to Japan, while Zhou Enlai, Ye Jianying and Ye Ting fled to British-controlled Hong Kong. He Long had been in strong opposition to the idea of a retreat, pointing out somewhat accurately that travelling over 1,000 miles on foot during the summer heat would not be an easy journey for those having to endure such an arduous task. He Long also pointed out that popular support from the Communists was higher among the peasant population in Hunan that the others had hoped for in Guangdong. He further opined that the new communist base should be established in the border region of Hunan, where they could easily be resupplied and numbers increased through the local population. However, his views were vetoed. After the defeat, He Long went home, having been demoted from his position as an army commander and in charge of tens of thousands of soldiers to that of a beggar. He Long was not well received by most of his family members, although he was able to raise another smaller army of around 3,000 soldiers, who were soon wiped out by the Nationalist forces, with only 3 dozen surviving. It would be another year before He Long's army would recover for the third time. Autumn Harvest Uprising. The Autumn Harvest Uprising was an insurrection that took place in the Chinese province of Hunan and Jiangxi on the 7th of September 1927, led by Mao Zedong, who established a short-lived Hunan Soviet. After initial success, the uprising was brutally put down by Kuomintang soldiers. Mao Zedong continued to believe in the rural strategy, but concluded that it would be necessary to form a party army. Background. Following Chiang Kai-shek's gaining control of the KMT in April 1927, he ordered the extermination of all communists and socialists located in Shanghai, commonly known as the White Terror. This led to a massacre in Hunan in May 1927 and the issuing of a warrant for the arrest of Mao Zedong. This prompted local peasant resistance against landlords, the breakdown of diplomacy between the KMT and the Chinese Communist Party, while Zhou Enlai launched an attempt to take Nanking. Mao Zedong became labelled as a Red Bandit, which led to his seeking revolutionary support. The uprising. Initially, Mao struggled to gather forces for an uprising in his home province of Hunan, but aided by Li Zhen, the local peasantry and members of a local communist troop were encouraged to join with Mao. Mao Zedong then led a small peasant army against the KMT and the landlords of Hunan, which led to a successful Soviet government being established. However, within 2 months, the uprising was defeated by the Kuomintang, and Mao and other survivors were forced to retreat to the Jinggang Mountains, located on the border between the provinces of Hunan and Jiangxi. Here, Mao encountered an army of miners who would come to help his fighting in later battles. Legacy. The Autumn Harvest Uprising was one of the early armed uprisings by the communists, which marked a significant change in their strategy. Mao Zedong and the founder of the Red Army, Zhu De, went on to develop a rural-based strategy that centered on guerrilla tactics. This later paved the way for the Long March of 1934. Conclusion. The first battles of the Chinese Civil War began with armed communist insurrections in the cities of Changsha, Nanchang, and Guangzhou. During the Nanchang Uprising in August 1927, communist troops were defeated but escaped from the Kuomintang by withdrawing into the mountains of Jiangxi. In September of that year, Mao Zedong led a small peasant army in the Autumn Harvest Uprising in Hunan province. This was an insurrection that was brutally crushed, with those survivors also fleeing into the Jinggang Mountains on the border of Jiangxi and Henan provinces. Once these two armies joined forces, they became the first elements of the People's Liberation Army. By the time the CCP Central Committee was forced to flee Shanghai, Mao had established peasants-based Soviets in both Jiangxi and Hunan provinces and turned the base of support for the communists from urban proletariat to the countryside where the People's War would be fought. This brings us to the end of this video, highlighting a period of Chinese history that significantly changed the China of today, from nationalists fighting communists for control that ultimately led to a long and brutal civil war that concluded with the formation of the People's Republic of China in 1949. If you've enjoyed watching and it's shown you a little detail of life and events here in China, then your subscribing to my channel would mean a lot to me. Thank you for watching. Make sure you click on the link to the next video, and until the next time, goodbye for now.